So, what really happens inside a school when a student is having a major emotional crisis? From the outside, it can look pretty chaotic, but behind the scenes, there's actually this incredibly well thought out playbook. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and break that whole system down step by step. Right. So, like I said, from the outside, it can seem like pure chaos. But what we're going to see is that there's a very structured system schools use to make sure everyone stays safe and supported. Let's dive into how they transform that moment of chaos into compassionate, effective care using a really clear process. Okay, so section one. And, the first and honestly the most critical step in managing a crisis isn't actually responding to one at all. It's about building an environment where crises are just way less likely to happen to begin with. It is all about prevention. And the very first line of defense? It's the classroom itself. I mean, think about it. A space that's organized with minimal clutter can really cut down on sensory overload for a student who might already be struggling. And having a designated calming area? That's like an escape valve before the pressure builds too high. It's all about creating a space that just feels predictable and safe. And it's not just the physical space, it's also about how time is managed. Predictable schedules and clear routines are just huge. They seriously cut down on uncertainty, which, can be a massive trigger for distress. Even simple things, like using the same phrase every time you switch activities, can make a world of difference in keeping the day feeling smooth and secure. And finally, proactive management means super clear expectations. When everyone knows the rules of the road, the whole environment just feels safer. But here's a really cool, subtle little detail. Notice the emphasis on positive framing. Instead of saying, don't run, the expectation is walk in the hallway. That tiny shift tells students what they should do, not just what they shouldn't. And that is way, way more effective. But look, even in the most supportive, well-run environments, crises can still happen. And when they do, nobody acts alone. That's when a coordinated team with very specific pre-assigned roles steps in to manage the whole situation safely. Now, this might just look like a simple chart, but it is an incredibly powerful tool for preventing chaos. See how everyone has just one job? The leader coordinates, the traffic controller manages the space. But check out the communicator. There's only one. That is completely intentional. It stops an already overwhelmed student from getting bombarded by a bunch of different adults, and it keeps the response focused and calm. All right, so the team is in place, but how do they actually navigate the crisis as it's unfolding? Well, their actions are guided by a roadmap called the crisis cycle. Understanding this cycle helps the staff match their response to exactly what the student needs in that very moment. And that whole roadmap is built on these 5 core principles. They make sure the focus stays right where it needs to be, on helping the student regain their own self-control. Number 3, managing your own emotions. That one is absolutely massive. A calm adult is one of the most powerful de-escalation tools there is. And number 4, that less is often more. We're going to see that idea pop up again and again. So this curve, this is the roadmap we were just talking about, the crisis cycle. What it shows us is that crises usually aren't these random explosions. They actually follow a pretty predictable pattern of escalation and then de-escalation. And by knowing where a student is on this curve, the staff can give the right support at exactly the right time. Let's walk through it. It all kicks off with a catalyst or a trigger. And this could be anything really, a tough assignment, a conflict with a friend, or even something we can't see. That initial adult response right here is so critical. The whole goal here is to jump in early with support. A simple, non-judgmental phrase like, hey, it looks like you're having a hard time, can interrupt the cycle before it really gets going. It's not about fixing the problem. It's about showing the student that they have an ally. And that builds trust immediately. Okay, but if that early support doesn't quite do the trick, we start moving up the curve into escalation. This is where the student's behavior begins to visibly change, and the adult strategy has to shift from general support to more direct de-escalation tactics. So here, the key is to offer what are called fail-safe choices. A question like, would you like to walk with me or with Mrs. Kim, gives the student a sense of control, right? It restores their sense of agency, but either choice is a safe one. It's just a brilliant way to validate their feelings while still guiding their behavior. As we keep climbing the curve, the student's emotional intensity ramps up, and their ability to think logically starts to go down. This is the point where the adult's response has to become even more focused, super simple, and incredibly calm. And this is a perfect example of that less is more principle we talked about. Communication becomes really simple, really direct. You're not negotiating or arguing. That just adds fuel to the fire. Right now, the adult's main job is to just be a calm, steady anchor in the student's storm. And here we are at the very peak of the cycle. This is where the student experiences a significant loss of control. Their rational brain is pretty much offline. And in this moment, the absolute number one priority for every single person involved is just safety. Any interaction is kept to the absolute bare minimum, only what's necessary to keep everyone safe. Staff are trained to look unhurried, to use non-threatening body language. Their composure is just crucial here because it sends a signal that the situation is under control, and that's what helps the student start the journey down the other side of the curve. Okay, so once that peak is passed, the student starts to de-escalate. But this is an incredibly fragile phase. I mean, they're starting to get control back, but their system is flooded with adrenaline, and their emotions are still completely raw. You know, rushing this part is a super common mistake, and it can easily trigger things all over again. This is not the time to talk about consequences or even ask what happened. It's a time for patience, for quiet support, and for taking care of basic needs. It's all about laying the groundwork to rebuild that crucial bond of trust. And that brings us to our final phase. And this part isn't just about the crisis being over, it's about everything that comes next. It's about rebuilding, reconnecting, and getting back to the really important work of learning. The whole focus of recovery is connection. It's about helping the student rejoin their day in a way that protects their dignity. Any conversation about what happened, that happens later, once the student is totally back in control and they're ready to learn from what happened, not be shamed by it. And this quote it sums the whole thing up perfectly. This entire carefully planned process is rooted in a really deep commitment to safety, to dignity, and at the end of the day, to education. It's about getting everyone back to a place where learning can happen again. So we can see the incredible amount of care and preparation that goes into this playbook. And it kind of brings us full circle, right back to that very first step, prevention. Knowing what it takes to create real safety, the question for all of us is how can we help build communities where this playbook is needed less and less often? That's our explainer for today. Thanks so much for diving in with us.